أزول تيمدكال أزول إويدود إذن غيحطنا الصيفرة وطاتين أمقران. أهلا بالزميلات والزملاء. شكرا للحضور الكريم. اكتزوري ردونيني خسور فاتي أريد يوسي أريد تيجي الحالة دي الصيف سيدي إفني مشان تغير دونسي غيف تفرتينو غيف طريقة ناروخ غيف تمغارين تمين السينما ستمازيغ السينما نيتو كان غيف إمازيغ راه تساول خص نكليزيت سورفات يخفت الدراون تات مشان دا تساول خص نكليزيت راه داونيني مخفت تيلي طريقة الوقت نكت لا فرنسا المغرب تات اسبانيول ومزن تمازيرت ماشي مزنتي تغاس غير البارود ومزنتي غير العسكر ومزنتي تعاود ستولافين ومزنتي تعاود تصاور الصور ناس نستعرض سكر واهلين نيد الفيلم نا غير نتاني مدنية السينما المغرب غير نتاني ندير مدني فرنسا يتميز رياضيين أرسكر إن الأفلام أرسكر يا التصوير يا تولاف تغيف إمازيغن تغيف مغربين سلعند ما نمشي لنا ما نمشي نسكسيو فرنسا. Right, so now I turn to English. So my paper is about French colonial film called Itto that was made in 1934, and it is a very celebrated film. It's very famous, but also very influential. This film is really about so many things. It's about the Battle of Lehri, which took actually part in the Middle Atlas Mountains in Morocco in 1914, whereby Zayan people, the Zayan Confederation, under the leadership of Mohammed V, managed to crush the French army in a very famous battle. So that inspired this film. But also the film is really about the Amazigh people themselves. And we will see that this representation is, as much as it tries to give a just and fair image of the Amazigh people in Morocco by putting a lot of their language on screen and by trying to just film on location and so on, it at the same time is affected by colonial discourse or the French colonial vision and discourse about the Amazigh people. And this is what I will be trying to explain in this presentation. So we move on. So this is a film that is really part of the body of French colonial cinema in Morocco. A lot of films were made, and this is one of the most accomplished, aesthetically speaking, but also one of the most discussed, because a lot of people think that this is a colonial film, yes, but it's also different because it tries to it begs to differ from other colonial films in terms of how it tries to represent the Moroccan people and Amazigh people in particular. But the film was made at a time when there was a lot of debate about the relationship between French colonial ideology and ethnic groups in North Africa. The main ethnic group then and now is the Amazigh people, or what French call the Berbères. And French viewed them as a kind of warrior race, a people who are very strong, very powerful, and also French were not actually kind of surprised that the Amazigh defended their land and defended all over the place, not just in Morocco but also in Algeria. They took arms and they defended their country against French colonizer. So, but actually when French arrived in Algeria in 1830, they thought that the Amazigh were different from what they called the Arabs or the Muslims, and then that they were actually although they were Muslim, they were barely Muslim because they had been converted only, when the Arabs arrived in the 7th century, but also it seems that they are just different from what French called the Arabs, by which they meant people who lived in cities. And the French believed that if they show the merits or what France was bringing to North Africa, that means in terms of education and infrastructure and so on, the Amazigh people would not resist them. But French were very surprised because very soon after in Algeria, I mean, the Kabyle region in particular, but also all over the place, it was mostly like Amazigh people who took up arms and just defended their country and their lands against French occupation. Also, this film was made, in 1934, so that was just 3 years after the infamous like Berber Dahir. Well, what is called Berber Dahir is actually a misnomer because that's not its real name. So it was actually like a law that was signed by the Moroccan Sultan, of course, under French guidance, that allowed the Amazigh to just keep using their own customary law in terms of civil like law cases in courts. And they had done the same thing for Muslim courts, and they had done the same thing also for Jewish courts with the Tahrir of 1918. But in this case, like the urban elites, especially in Fez, but also Rabat, that had started to, I mean, get a French education in particular, but also just, Quranic education, they rose up against this and, interpreted it as a sign of France trying to divide like the Amazigh from the Arabs, in Morocco. And then actually that was one of the founding myths, because it's not really a fact. It's one of the founding myths of Moroccan nationalism during the colonial period, and which would serve to marginalize Amazigh people in general, but also their language and culture in public space, in education, in media, a fact that we still live with today. Now, the film itself was shot entirely on location, which is very, very important because very few films had been shot on location in Morocco. Some of them, like Maktoub 1919, was the first to be shot on location in Morocco. But when you compare it to Itto is a much longer film, but also a much more rich film. And then also the majority of actors in the film are Amazigh, where they had been chosen, and the film was shot in Telwet, and again, thanks to Basha al-Glawi's, intervention. So he sent the film crew to Telwet, his home place, where he had a kasbah. And actually, if you watch the film, it's available on YouTube. You'll see that a lot of the scenes that take place in Basha al-Glawi's, kasbah in Telwet. And also another remarkable thing about this film is that dialogue, like the language used in conversations and dialogue in the film, is evenly, like 50-50, divided between Tamazight and French. Well, I would not want to spoil the plot for you. I invite you to watch the film because now it's available on YouTube. But it's a love story between Itto and a man, Miloud, and they both belong to different clans. So, Miloud belongs to a different clan. Itto is the daughter of Hammu, and both their fathers, they are actually, they are sheikhs, so they are the leaders of their tribes. And they are both at the beginning of the film, they make a deal to resist French occupation. But very soon after, like when Miloud's clan's sheep are dying and people, and especially like Miloud's uncle is suffering, I will not go into details, but the thing that happens is that, a French, pilot is captured, taken hostage to Miloud's clan. His father is Sheikh Hassan or Lahsan. And then, they just, get treatment from a French doctor. And then when they see like the French medicine, they just change camp and then they betray Miloud's father, Sheikh Hassan, betrays Sheikh Hamou and says, I will not resist French because I think what they are bringing us is good, is just medicine and civilization. And basically the film in this way divides the Amazigh people into good versus bad Berbers. And so the good Berbers are the ones who accept France and what it's bringing, which is peace and technology and love, which is just colonial discourse. Because in reality, the France was also mainly massacring people because they wanted to be free and wanted to resist French occupation. The bad Berbers are those like Sheikh Hamou who don't see that and they resist France and its occupation. And Hamou has a daughter, and they're both here. So at the top is Sheikh Hamou. And of course, this is a reference to how Hamou Zayani, leader of Zayan, of Isaïtan's resistance against French occupation. And Itto, as you can see there, was in a love relationship with Miloud, that she marries, in the film, and then has a child with him. She is played by Simone Biriou. And Simone Biriou was none other than the wife of Henri Biriou, a very important public servant during in the colonial administration and a key advisor to General Lyoty about the Berber policy of France, like how France should deal with the Amazigh people in Morocco. And Simone Berry is said to be the only French woman who spoke Tamazight. Well, that's not true. Maybe the only actress that spoke language fluently, but she speaks it in film. But you can also see that she's not that actually fluent, and also that she uses a mix of like sometimes of words, like a sentence that doesn't have a verb or something like that. But what's very important for me, and this is my concluding remark, and you can read the paper for more, is that it is a kind of Pocahontas. It is a kind of indigenous woman who is there, who betrays her own people, and then takes sides like with the occupier, in this case French army, and helps them to take her land and to take over her own people. And the idea is that Itto is smarter than her father, because she sees the merits, or she sees like the gains that her people could make from just making peace with France, instead of taking arms and trying to resist French army. So you can see here that Itto and her father, they are like complete opposites. They stand on different sides of the spectrum. So Itto believes that France is good, whereas Hamou believes that France is bad. And Sheikh Hamou, even when his own people start leaving him because they think that he is mad by trying to resist France, although it had better weapons, and also because France was bringing medicine and so on. But Sheikh Hamou is a kind of, like in colonial discourse, a kind of noble savage, a kind of person. So it's not a noble slave as it says in the slides, it's a noble savage. And you can find it also in the paper, in the book. It's a noble savage, someone who is who has this culture of honor and would not submit to the colonizer and would rather die. And which is what happens in film. So in the last scene of the film, Hamou dies, and also Itto dies with him. Because although she thinks that he is not on the right side of history by resisting French, Itto actually just goes there and she dies with her father, like in his last stand against French, because after all, he's her own father. So this makes the film very dramatic. But the idea is that also, it is very clear that the only way for Amaziran, for the Amazigh people at that time, was to just follow France and accept its rule and domination and so on. Something that they didn't do. Instead, they took arms against France. They defeated it, and then they were also defeated in many battles up until 1933 with the Battle of Bogafer. But thing is that, they paid a very heavy price for that during that period, because thousands of Amazigh people died. But also they were on the losing side of history, because after independence they were not rewarded for their heroism, for their resistance. Instead, they were marginalized, have been completely marginalized in lots of spheres, especially like education and language policy and so on. Things have improved a little bit now with the language being taught in some schools up to 8 or 9% of national schools. But for a people who resisted French occupation and towards the end of the colonial period also contributed significantly to getting rid of the colonizer and the colonial occupation, they have not been rewarded for that. And the key to that is also colonial representations, as we see in this film. The Amazigh being, kind of shown as a people who are prone to French colonization, who would accept French colonization as soon as they see that it is bringing them all sorts of good things and so on and so forth. And film, although it was made after Lyoté had left Morocco, it was also film just demonstrates this French ideology about the Amazigh, that they are not really Muslim, that they are different, that they are just a warrior race, and all these kinds of representations are still with us. So that's why after independence and even today among the Moroccan intellectual scenes, the Amazigh are still looked at as just the kind of exotic race, a kind of people who don't have their own language and culture and so on and so forth. So I think my time is up, so I will just finish here and look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.